Hey guys, Kate Sparks here again, back for another vlog entry with some reader questions. I actually have a couple that overlap this time, so let's see. We have one from Shannon Andrews who asks, what is your process in starting a book? And we have from Kathy Dunleavy, hello ladies. I would love to hear your step-by-step process from idea in your head to actually writing. How much is pre-planned and how much just happens as you go along? How detailed are your characters and plot in your head or on paper before you ever start to type? So today I guess we're talking about my process for getting ideas and preparing to write. My kids are home right now, so this might be a little bit crazy. So the process starts, not surprisingly, with an idea. I keep my ideas in this gorgeous notebook because they deserve that. They deserve the royal treatment. They're wonderful. Ideas can come from anywhere. For me, a lot of the time, story ideas are the result of two separate ideas or concepts colliding and coming together to make something that's actually interesting. In the case of my first book, Bound, and the trilogy that followed, that idea formed over a long period of time when I was spending a lot of time in bed sleeping off headaches. The ideas that came together there were, not surprisingly, a character with headaches, but with magical origins or consequences, which would make them a heck of a lot more interesting than my headaches. And I had the idea that I would like to read a story about a sheltered, kind of naive young woman who accidentally saved the life of a powerful enemy and has to deal with the consequences of that. And of course that enemy would be like deadly attractive, right? Because I like romance and stories, and that's just kind of how my ideas tend to go. Have you met Aaron? Yeah. But other ideas come to me a lot more quickly. I have ideas for a series of books about vampires set in Newfoundland. Those will most likely be coming out under a pen name just because the audience for them will be a little bit different from my young adult fantasy. They'll be a little bit darker, a little more violent, a lot sexier. So we'll save that discussion for another day because pen names are a huge topic and a really big decision for me. But anyway, that idea came to me when I was out walking one day. I was walking along and all of a sudden there was this character talking to me, like sort of whispering in my ear, and I had the first scene of the first book just popped fully formed into my head and introduced me to these characters that I immediately fell in love with, even though I never wanted to write vampires. Much as I love reading about them, I thought the market's already overcrowded, everything's already been done, but they convinced me that they deserve to have their story told, so I'm really excited to get back to that. The first book is drafted, but I still have a lot of work to do on the rest of the series before they see the light of day, so to speak. I mean, they're vampires, right? They're not actually going to see the light of day. Right. Into Allurian, which comes out on June 15th. Yay! The idea for that one was sort of half-handed to me. It's part of a group series project, and every book in that series shares a common starting point. But from that point on, every book belongs to its own author. So my idea for that one revolved around monsters. I ended up with ogres and something called an amalgus, which is an amalgamation of a whole bunch of different creatures and incredibly sexy, which is good for fantasy romance. I'm pretty excited about Zinnian. He's awesome. What was I talking about? He's really distracting, actually. Really distracting. And my next project, the idea came to me while I was sleeping, which sounds really crazy because usually I get these ideas as I'm falling asleep or as I'm waking up, sort of in that half-dreaming state. And the ideas seem absolutely brilliant at the time. Like, they seem like the best things that anyone has ever thought of. One time I had this idea as I was falling asleep, and I worked so hard on trying to remember it as I was falling asleep because I was sure that this was going to be a huge moneymaker. It was going to be the next big genre that I was inventing. It was like a Western, but it was really wet. Like everything in this Old West setting was just soaking wet. Some things took place underwater, I think. There were cowboys and there was a lot of mud. My brain doesn't usually work that well when I'm tired. But in the case of my next project, it is actually something that I thought of while I was half asleep, and it was great. So, you know, ideas really can come from anywhere. The key thing, I think, is being open to them. But the idea is not the most important thing. I think that's a mistake that a lot of people make. I used to think that. I thought that all I needed was a great idea, something that was intriguing and captivating that people would love, and I thought that the hard part was done. Which is crazy, because the idea is the easy part. This notebook here that has all my ideas in it, most of them are never going to become stories. A lot of them will eventually, but they're not ready yet. I need ideas to be ready before I start working on them. I'm actually really proud of myself because you know how easily distracted I am. It would be really easy to just have an idea pop into my head and start chasing it down the rabbit hole. But I find for me that leads to a lot of dead ends. So I have prepared a list of the things that I like to have in place before I start drafting a story. And then we'll call it quits for today because this video is already getting kind of long. Sorry about that. Okay, so the first thing that I need before I start drafting a story is the characters. I need compelling characters, and I need characters who are going to work together properly. And by that I mean characters whose personalities will provide as much conflict for the story as the plot will. Because if everybody's getting along and everything's sunshine and happiness and insta-love and all that stuff, I find it makes for a less interesting story. There needs to be a lot of internal conflict for the characters, which means that I need to know what they want, I need to know what motivates them, I need to know what their goals are, and I need to know what's going to get in their way. And if part of what gets in their way is the other characters, that's even better. I need a solid story concept. So I like to have an idea of the theme. I don't like the themes in my book to be heavy-handed because I'm not writing fables. I'm not writing the kind of fiction that's trying to impose morals on readers. But I do like to have a common thread that holds the story together. And I like to have an outline. I am an outliner. I'm not ashamed of that. I know a lot of people say, well, I would outline, but that would stifle my creativity, and I like to just be able to follow the story wherever it goes and let the characters take control. I'm not making fun of you because I used to work that way, and sometimes I still do in shorter stories that aren't as much of a time commitment for me. Anyone who's not familiar with the term, that's generally known as pantsing, or writing by the seat of your pants. Not like pulling down somebody's pants in the school hallway. That's a different kind of pantsing. That's not nice. We don't do that. One of my kids actually used the term whitewater drafting a couple weeks ago by accident, and I think that's actually a better way to describe it because that's kind of what it feels like, right? You're caught in the current and you're sort of careening wildly down the river of your story and trying to steer a little bit, but kind of just seeing where it takes you, which can be really fun. I've nothing, absolutely nothing against pantsing or whitewater drafting, as the case may be. It's a wonderful process if it works for you. What I have found through trial and error is that if I'm pantsing, if I don't have an outline, if I don't know where the story is going, I get off course. I end up writing thousands and thousands of words that are not going to be in the finished manuscript and that don't improve on the finished manuscript in any way. I kind of If I don't have a map, I drive into walls, basically. I crash. I have one story that I did for NaNoWriMo a few years ago, just to sort of make up the time and word count after I finished drafting Sworn. And I had an idea. It was a good idea. I had amazing characters. I really want to get back to them someday because they were fantastic. They were really different from anything that I'd worked with before. But what happened was I didn't have a really solid idea for the world that I was working in, and I didn't have a solid idea of where the plot was going. So while I ended up with a lot of good scenes, they didn't add up to anything, really. So I abandoned it. I abandoned that book after probably 25,000 words, which is a lot of work to put into something that you're not going to finish. And it's a lot of work to put into something that's going to have to be completely rewritten. So the mental block that I needed to get over was the idea that an outline wouldn't allow me to explore. The exact same work is getting done either way, no matter how I do it. Either I do the exploring in the brainstorming and outline stage, when I have incredible freedom and the story can go any direction I want it to, and the characters can take the story any direction they want to, and subplots can make themselves known just like they do when you're pantsing. So what happens now is I do all of that in the outline stage. So instead of my rough draft basically being 100,000 word outline packed with stuff that I'm not going to use and that isn't really illuminating for the story or the characters or anything, I end up with a solid outline that tells me exactly where the story is going to go. And what I find now is that when I have that outline, I'm actually more free to explore within the story. I can spot opportunities more easily, opportunities that previously I wouldn't have seen until maybe draft 2 or even draft 3 are now appearing in the first draft because I'm prepared for them. The story is ready for them. My first drafts, when I have an outline, look a lot more like later drafts if I'm pantsing, because I am free to focus more on the structure of the sentences and on the snappy dialogue and on the deeper connections between events in the story than I would be if I was focusing on, oh my god, what's gonna happen next? Again, not making fun of you if you're pantsing. I'm making fun of me previously when I was doing something that didn't work for me. And I think that's the most important takeaway from that. Really, unfortunately, lengthy segment there, sorry. For me, outlining works. For other people, pantsing is absolutely ideal. Stephen King is a pantser. He's doing okay. The point is that if writing by the seat of your pants, if starting with characters and a basic concept and just seeing where they take you is what floats your boat, that is wonderful. But people asked about my process, so I'm sharing about my process. And my process involves outlining. So I guess that brings us to the end of those questions about how I prepare to write a story. Thank you guys for your patience. I hope this has been at least a little bit interesting. I hope that answered your questions, Shannon and Kathy. Thank you for asking. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your likes on the videos. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for watching. I will see you next time. Bye for now.